Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. I hope it finds you well. My name is John. I am an author, and thank you for joining me in another one of my videos. Being that it is Monday, an infamously difficult day for everyone's mental health, I figure these are good days to talk a little bit and share a little bit about my own mental health. As always, anything I talk about here is purely my own experience. If you're struggling, please struggling with anything, please reach out to a psychological professional. Whatever that happens to look like. I'm just going to share what works for me. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started here. Next off is a topic that I very much has been a major part of my life for all of my 36 years. I'm going to give you a hot take on it. Hold on. Anxiety sucks. It really does. I know it's probably blown some of your minds, but it's just not fun. It feels like one of the best descriptions I've ever heard is the meme I've seen bouncing all around the internet in various places that said, anxiety is like having an improv group in your brain, just, spinning off crazy scenarios at, every little prompt you give it that nobody's comfortable with. I have probably been, to some degree or another, anxious or had anxiety most of my life. Just looking back on some of the stuff that I've had and experienced, I mean, the anxiety of middle school got to the point where like I was getting sick every morning. That wasn't fun. And just in general, yeah, just it's been a very major feature in my life where how I've experienced it is kind of like that improv group joke or information is just you know anything that goes through my head, like my brain, can go into like, what about this? What about this? Well, if I say this, then this other play, then they might say this, or they might get mad or upset, or I might be bugging or imposing on people, and all of these completely ridiculous things um, that have just, at one point or another, I think once or twice in my life, led me down the path of potentially developing some kind of ulcers, stomach ulcers, or just played a major role in wreaking havoc on my work, my relationships, everything, and certainly 100% has been one of the things that has gotten in the way of my writing. Of not feeling I'm good enough, that I'm going to be, that laughed at, I'm never going to be successful, I'm never going to be. And it stopped me from even the best description I would have for it, and I can't take credit for this particular thought, is quite often my anxiety prevents me from even attempting something and allowing another person to react and respond to me. Like my anxiety concern that no one would be like interested in my writing, or I'd never make it or work any, be able to be successful as a writer, has stopped me from sharing and promoting my work for years, which is not giving anybody an attempt to give anything. Like, and honestly, what's the worst that that happens? I put myself out there, people read it, and they give me feedback, and I'll become a better writer for the next thing I write. Or it stops me from sharing a thought or sharing a feeling or sharing a concern, with my wife or other loved ones. Not even giving them a chance to like respond or understand or take care of them. I'm essentially taking the choice away from them to help me, to support me, to do what I need. I'm gonna take a drink of coffee here. Thank you for bearing with me while I make sure I can keep talking for a little bit. And it just it plays out, and one of the things linked with that, one of my strengths, I think, as a writer, is I've always had a very very active and eager imagination. So, I can really like visualize and get into my stories, but it also means that when my anxiety is kicking up, I can really visualize and get into all this many, 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 many stuff, things, whatever, that just eat up my brain and eat up my I think of it like a computer, eat up my RAM processing power, and stop me from doing anything. And I don't know if any of you have had this either, but I even sometimes go into, I'm not sure anxiety is the right word, but it feels kind of the same about like the possibility of like good things happening. And like I just build this up in my head, like applying for like a job I really want, or putting in a proposal I really, of like something at work that I'm really excited about. It's like, I just, it builds up in my head of like, oh, and the interview, and if I do this, and if I get the job, I can do this, and I can imagine that, I'll be so much happier that, when I get the job, and because of this and this and this and this and this, which sort of sets me up for failure, disappointment, whatever, if I don't end up getting it, even for particularly, and again, it's trying not to internalize a lot of that, but that probably has nothing really to do with me. There's probably just a better candidate, which is fine. But like I built it up so much in my head, and it just creates all these problems for me. Um, yeah, it's not fun. Again, I'm going back to my hot take. Anxiety sucks. Um, and it just spins out, and that leads to another thing is, where my tend to reaction to my anxiety spiking is to like shut down. Like I don't have panic attacks like you'd see in the movies or see described, where I'm just like freaking out, I can't control my breath, heart racing, anything like that. My version of that, it's the, we've all heard of fight or flight, but the true thing of, reaction to a stressor or something suddenly is fight, flight, or freeze. Freeze is always what I go with. And sort of to go back to the computer analogy, like the anxiety just eats up and builds up and just sort of locks my brain down and takes over. So I don't talk to anyone, I don't respond, I don't engage, and that's again in a very similar way to not deciding not to share things proactively. If I'm in a stressful situation, shutting down doesn't help the situation. Like talking it out and working it out with, whether that be a significant other, a friend, a relative, whatever, like that shutting down prevents the situation from getting resolved, or it does for me. Like, and it goes to, my wife calls it my sad robot look. We're just sort of the emotional chip has crashed, and I'm just running on autopilot. It's not good for me. It's not good for her. It's not good for anyone. Um, I really started sort of my journey in control, which is still ongoing. I still have anxiety. I don't think that's probably always going to be a part of me in some way. But um, 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago now, I did start getting on medication, and about 3 or 4 months ago, realized that medication on its own was not the dosage I was taking of the medication for my anxiety wasn't enough. So, along with my doctor, and I'm also working with a psychiatrist, up to that dosage. Um, it really helped, being in therapy, which I am in. It's ongoing therapy. Talking about and working on developing effective coping strategies is work I definitely have ongoing. And quite to my surprise, a large amount of my anxiety stems from me having ADHD. Um, the psychologist who did the evaluation and officially diagnosed me with ADHD because knew about my anxiety diagnosis, sort of talked about, and depression. I'll talk about that in a later video. Really comes from having, in part, my ADHD, partly, the ADHD tendency to really hyper focus on things, which, is definitely a part of anxiety or makes it worse at anyhow. But also that sort of there's a cognitive disconnect of like, I know what I'm capable of, like over up here. I know what I'm capable of when I'm operating at my base, but because of my, at the time and for most of my life, untreated and unproperly treated, medicated, coped with, whatever the, you know, all of the above ADHD, where I was often performing was down here, and that disconnect of between what I'm capable of and where I was often performing at because of my ADHD was a huge stress of my, or a huge part of my anxiety and depression. And I can say again, this is for myself. Everybody's different. Please talk to a professional. But being on medication for my ADHD and really making that also a part of my therapy is really sort of developing coping mechanisms for my ADHD, and addressing it has really been a big help. So that's a little bit about my thoughts on anxiety. Um, Sort of to close things off, gonna end with a shameless plug. I do have, as I mentioned, I am an author. I do have two books available on Amazon. I've got the links below. The Shadow of the Past, that's my first one, and The Sunburned Red, and I'm currently working on a third book. I'm about a third of the way through writing it, called When Gods Do Metal. Um, if you like what you see or my ramblings, I have please like, share, and subscribe this. Like and share and comment on this video. Comment particularly if there's any other mental health things, any questions you have, or any other mental health topics you have. Would love for you to subscribe, get notifications, all that for my channel. It should be somewhere over here. And I'll also link to my previous video where I talk a little bit about ADHD. I'll link that on here as well. Check it out. Again, being that it is Monday, I hope you all your mental health is treating you well or as best as possible. And I hope you all have, wherever and whoever you are, I hope you have a great day and a good week for your mental health.